What is up, ladies and gentlemen? You're listening to the Air Raid Attack podcast, your home of the unscripted, unfiltered, 100% authentic. And we got a fun show tonight. Joining me from the In the Flat podcast, Tony and Jordan. Guys, welcome to the Air Raid. And how are you guys doing this evening?
Hey, we're doing good. Thank you for having us. So we're just excited football is actually here. We can stop previewing stuff and actually talk about games that are about to happen because we have done so many previews shows this summer. I'm sure people are sick of hearing about it. They just want to see some games. So we're excited to be here to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to be here and talk about games with more than just Tony and Jeff.
Yeah, I've turned to Jordan as well. We talked enough each other enough for sure. So.
No, I'm I'm definitely with you guys. I've done a lot of previewing ourselves on my end, and joining Coach I on the Fan Addict Sports podcast, talking previewing Oklahoma, and it's time to put those pads on, get to work. So first things first, as we are recording this show, who knows what may happen within the next hour. Of course, conference realignment was the biggest talk of all of summer. I think that even took care of what's going on in the Major League Baseball. I think has been the biggest discussion. Of course, Oklahoma and Texas go into the SEC. Now we have Colorado going back to the Big 12, including Arizona State, and Utah to the Big 12. And then we get USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington to the Big 10, which is still interesting. Of course, now as we are recording this, California, Stanford, and SMU are considering, or the ACC is considering, I should say, those three additions to those three schools when it comes to the ACC expansion. So I guess best way to kick things off is, Jordan, what are your thoughts on conference realignment for as we are at right now? And then, of course, I want to add this to both of your guys' answer is Notre Dame, the biggest independent out there, and probably the only one left that's really worth anything. Where do they go? Let's just play devil's advocate. California, Stanford, and SMU. Let's just say they do go to the ACC. Where does Notre Dame fit into all of this chaos right now?
So, just to start off, conference realignment's crazy. I mean, you have all these teams. Now we're going to have a Rutgers night game against USC, who's on the other side of the country. Either way, you're going to watch that game. Fans in Rutgers are going to watch USC Rutgers in USC at 2 a.m.
Yep.
So it's kind of crazy to me, these schools that are it's not regional anymore, and they're expanding like all the United States. But for Notre Dame, I definitely think Big Ten is their biggest, the best bet. I think the ACC is kind of slowly going away. There's a lot of talks of a lot of teams leaving the ACC, especially in the last couple. Even the last year, there's that Magnificent Seven that we're thinking about leaving the ACC. So there's a lot of things like that. I know FSU really, really wants to leave. So I think Notre Dame going to the Big Ten is probably the best bet. I think it's going to be regional, a lot better for them, and they'll get the money that they would already are getting. But the biggest thing is that's the reason Notre Dame doesn't want to leave. They're not going to go to a conference willingly, basically, because they get so much money from their individual contracts, individual NBC contracts. Under Armour can kind of do what they want to do scheduling wise. I mean, Notre Dame's schedule is brutal this year, but then you can look at Michigan's schedule, which is they play nobodies and it's super easy. So I think right now Notre Dame's not going to want to join the conference unless they're kind of forced to, just because of how much they get out of it.
Right.
Yeah, I would say for Notre Dame right now, I mean, I think Jack Swarbrick, their AD, had a press conference over in Dublin today about all the damage that realignment is doing to the sport, and how it's a shame what's happening. And I agree. I mean, if you think about realignment, I mean, football is not thinking about the upper sports. Honestly, we just need to go ahead and pull the plug and say football has its own thing over here,
Exactly.
and all the other sports get regionalized again, and then your Rutgers volleyball doesn't have to go play USC, and they have to fly and they have no money to do it. And how are they going to do that? And I'm worried about the rest of the sports and what we're going to do. I'm worried about Stanford, who's won the most national championships of all athletic departments, doesn't have a home right now, and they may go to the ACC, they may go somewhere else. It's just a shame that those kind of situations are happening. For Notre Dame, I mean, if they're looking at the craziness of all these conference realignments, they don't want to get involved in it. They're their own boss right now. They can make their own schedule, they can do their own thing, and they don't have to worry about their conference going away or somebody else being added, their schedule being dictated. And so it's going to take a lot for them to be added in. To Jordan's point, it's going to have to be a force. And really, the only conference that I can see that happen is the Big Ten. They're not going to go to SEC.
No.
And I think eventually Georgia will be broken up in between the SEC and the Big Ten. We know where we're going, the two big super conferences, and you have to find your way in there, like almost like a Premier League if you follow soccer. With these are the premier programs. What I wonder about is some of these lowly programs in the Big Ten SEC today. So like a Northwestern or a Minnesota or a Vanderbilt, are they going to be pushed out? It would be another question I have, because what purpose are they serving other than an easy win? And if you're going to get to a Premier League, I think that's probably where we're going. You probably want the best 24 to 48 teams. You just put them in a conference and go at it, I guess, because I think that's where we're going. And I think that's probably what we're going to end up having to do just to kind of save the rest of the sports.
No, you guys have made a good point. It's the Olympic sports with, the basketballs, especially, like the volleyballs, the softballs, and the baseballs, and so on and so forth. I was on Herb and Raj podcast, and we talked about that. And the Olympic sports is, obviously the football, pays the bills, as they say, across all major college football. And what happens? Could we? I hate saying this, but you kind of have to throw that out there, because we're seeing, like Jordan said, we're seeing these regionals start to be now break up. It was local, now we're just going across the world, and USC playing Rutgers and stuff like that. When it comes to these Olympic sports, could we eventually down the road could see maybe them just canceling just because of the money expenses? Or is that a thought down the road?
That's my worry, is that some of these sports, like Stanford almost canceled like 7 or 8 sports a couple years ago until they had some boosters come in and save them, and that was they were in the Pac-12 making money. What they're not in these, like, if they're not making all the money they need to make, and my fear is all these streaming channels are starting to lose a lot of money. Yep. So in these next contracts that these conferences want to make, they're probably not going to make the money they're making today, is my thought. As they get less money, and now you have to travel across country to all this, you're going to lose money. I just don't see how these sports can make it. That's why I'm saying you're going to have to figure out. They need a commissioner to figure all this out and do things, but everybody's kind of pulling their own thing, doing their solid work, and it's just making a mockery of the sport a bit to me.
Yeah, I definitely think the college football needs to be its own entity. Yeah, it needs to come away from NCAA and be, college football only. Because right as of where it sits right now, college football makes the most money for schools, and they are literally hurting. Like, I think a lot of, the administrative and everything don't look at these student athletes as student athletes anymore. They make them millions of dollars a year, but they're student athletes. It's not fair for a volleyball player that is wanting a degree. They're not going to really be there's not so much a lot of sports outside of college, and they want a degree, and now they have to travel across country, miss classes, get stressed. There's so much to it that they don't think about because they're only thinking about football.
No, I think that's a great point, and I know numerous of coaches, Missouri being one. I know Washington State's head coach expressed that as well. As we're looking at, all we're talking about is football, but we're missing the point when it comes to volleyball and softball and sports like that. Of course, leads to the final two if assuming Cal and Stanford does go, and that's Oregon State, Washington State. Where does the Pac-2 at this point, in fact, if they were other to do in fact leave, where does the Pac-2 go from here? We refer to Oregon State and Washington State. Do they merge with Mountain West to kind of salvage what they can, or where can we see them in the mix?
It It makes the most sense to probably merge with the Mountain West and just get rid of the Mountain West name and call it the Pac-12 or whatever you want, the Pac-16, whatever,
Right.
or Pac-West or whatever you want to call it. I think just because logically that makes the most sense, and you'll have the strongest probably conference there. I know the AAC was also rumored as a potential to get some of those teams, but the travel for some of those schools will still be outrageous, and they have less money to do that. So I think it makes the most sense to kind of do a merge with the Mountain West. I know those teams probably don't want to do that, but it's probably the best. I mean, some of those teams are already playing in their in some of the Olympic sports together already, so it's not going to be too crazy of a moment. I just feel bad for Oregon State and Washington State fans because both of those teams are starting to make some positive momentum in football and other sports, and they're starting to play better, get better recruiting happening, get some good coaches on board, and now you're going to be kind of pushed down into the lower level almost, and which that's going to hit back recruiting, hit back future contracts. You're going to be starting kind of back over, and I just feel bad for those fans.
No, yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be weird for those two schools. I mean, Mountain West is probably the most realistic, but then I'm surprised we haven't heard a lot about them pushing to join the Big 12 or something like that. Just something other than like the lesser conference. I don't know.
Respectfully, maybe Oregon State and Washington State will dominate the Mountain West. There's some good Mountain West teams out there.
And that's what I'm thinking is maybe they join that,
Mm-hmm.
They win the conference, and if the conference automatic qualifier for playoffs still exists, and hey, they get a free ride right into the playoffs every year, right? So maybe that's best for them. I don't know.
Hey, I mean, at this point, I'm sure that they've got to be starting shopping, or they've got to be doing something. But conference realignment, I'm sure, is not dead. We're gonna just keep things going, and who knows what's going to happen here in the next 24 hours. Referring to the ACC, and I can guarantee probably next summer we may have a whole bunch of other teams. Who knows what may happen once it's all said and done. Yep. Moving on to the 23 Notre Dame. Of course, you guys are Fighting Irish, and I'd kind of like to pick your guys' mind on this one, simply because Notre Dame, hasn't really been the team that everybody's been talking about, simply because college football has been all about realignment. But Notre Dame's a really interesting team coming into 23. Of course, you got Wake Forest's transfer, Sam Hartman, coming in at quarterback, which, in my opinion, maybe I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts. Is I would say probably a massive upgrade, or at least an upgrade, if anything, towards Notre Dame's offense. Definitely one of the best offensive lines in the country, and your running back core is pretty good and pretty deep in that area. Receiving core, I don't know much about, so definitely fill me in. Of course, Marcus Freeman has got some questions, I think, on defense that's going to have to be addressed. Recapping 22, but definitely in 23. What are the expectations, Jordan, when it comes to Notre Dame football for 23?
Expectations for Notre Dame football is that their offense is kind of going to rule their team just because Sam Hartman's going to be that guy. I mean, we haven't had a quarterback as good as Sam Hartman in a long time. Tony says since Brady Quinn.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. So with the Sam Hartman coming in, I think we have a decent enough receiving core to be able to handle it. I think depth right now at receivers is kind of iffy, but offensive line, running back room is great. Defense, they filled a lot of holes. Marcus Freeman's in his second year as head coach, so the holes that were missing because of either transfers from last year or just Brian Kelly being not the recruiting guy that teams need nowadays, is going to be fully optimized. And I think Sam Hartman's bringing in a culture to match Marcus Freeman's culture to make Notre Dame just an overall better team in general. And the biggest thing this offseason was, like you said, Wake Forest transfer Sam Hartman. I think that was the biggest thing to make that leap. I mean, if you look at last year, because we didn't have a quarterback that could throw the ball 20 yards.
Right.
If 5 yards barely.
Yeah, barely. Could barely see over the offensive line. Like Notre Dame should have been in the talk at the end of the season, at least to be in the college football playoffs. They should have beat Ohio State. They, shouldn't have lost to Marshall. Could have beat USC. Things like that. Without a quarterback, it really hindered them. And their, last year their special teams was great. Their defense had some question marks, but the rebuilding of their defense was, good this offseason. So I definitely see Notre Dame at least losing, just hopefully not one game, but one, maybe 2 games, just because they got Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. The biggest question mark in games out of that is it's at Clemson, a night game. It's going to be tough. So things like that. But no, all around, I think Notre Dame really filled the holes this offseason. And with especially quarterback, I think that was the biggest hole they needed to fill, and that's what they filled.
Yeah, no, to George's point, I mean, I really don't feel like we've had a quarterback since Brady Quinn. It's just we've had some decent quarterbacks that are game managers that get the job done. We get into the playoffs. What happens? We don't have the quarterback that gets scored points to win those games. Defense can be as good as it is, but it hasn't had the depth. One thing I really appreciate over the last couple of years since Marcus Freeman came as a defense coordinator is he has really added depth to the defensive side, and now they started doing that on the offensive side since he became head coach. I do like Sam Hartman coming in with close to 13,000 passing yards in his career, 110 touchdowns. I mean, that's just he'll be able to make the receiver core that is young and inexperienced, I think, better in their earlier on than they probably are expected to be. So I like him. And then you mentioned the running back, Audric Estime, had close to 1,000 yards splitting time last year with Logan Diggs, who went to LSU. He has 4 running backs behind him that are hungry and ready to play, and they're all listed as co-starters behind a co-second unit behind him. So there's 4 potential players behind him, all top recruits that can come in and play right away. So I'm interested to see what the running back does. So what I'm interested to see, Sam Hartman did all that at Wake Forest with not a great offensive line, with not as great skill talent and not as great running backs. And now he's going to have all that with him. And I'm interested to see what kind of that unlocks in his game. For the receiver, you mentioned they're young and inexperienced. So the hope is that sophomore Tobias Merriweather, he only had 1 catch for 41 yards, a touchdown last year, but he's young. If you saw him, he'd be the guy like, okay, he fits on like Oklahoma, Georgia, Ohio State. He has that talent coming from California. So that's who they're thinking they will step up. They have some young players, in that area. Jaden Grayhouse, Braylon James, both from the Texas area. Well-regarded players. Rico Flores was a well-regarded receiver as well. So a lot of young guys that if they step up and they can produce, this could be a really unique team. On the defensive side, I would say they can go 8 or 9 deep on the defensive line. What's going to be really just deciding factor if this defense is special or not is if those guys can step up and be difference makers. Now, these guys could all be great role players, but can any of them step up to be those defensive playmakers? I think Jordan Botelho, a Gabriel Rubio, a Howard Cross, Riley Mills, Jason Ane, all those guys have the skill to take the next step. They just haven't had the opportunity yet. They all had the opportunity this year, and I'm interested to see what they do. The strength of the defense is going to be in the cornerback room. Benjamin Morrison had 6 interceptions last year as a true freshman. He comes in there with Cam Hart. Both are expected to be top draft picks when they come out in the NFL. So that's a really solid group with young freshmen that are highly regarded behind them as well. So I really think this team, if they come together right, I think they could do some good things this year. Jordan mentioned those 3 top games. Ohio State early in the season. Ohio State right now hasn't figured out their quarterback situation. Their offensive line is a lot of question marks. So last year Notre Dame lost by 11 with terrible quarterback play in Columbus. This year it goes to South Bend. They have a quarterback against a team that doesn't have a quarterback and offensive line issues. I'm kind of leaning toward Notre Dame in that one. USC is coming to South Bend as well. I see that as more as a shootout with Caleb Williams. I don't know how I'm sure you guys have feelings about Caleb Williams there.
You had to go there, Tony.
I had to go there, So I'm thinking we could take USC, as Jordan mentioned. The one I'm worried about would be definitely Clemson at night. They're 18-1. at home in the last 19 games at night. So I'm thinking that's going to be a challenge, and nobody does that. Nobody wins there, so it's going to be a challenge there. But there's some trap games in there. I think Pittsburgh's going to be a pretty good team. Defense is always good for Pittsburgh. You have Duke is going to be a really good with Riley Leonard as quarterback and a really strong defensive unit Mike Elko has put together there. And then there's several little trap games right before big games, right after big games that you have to kind of worry about. But I'm thinking, at least 11-1, 10-2 is what we're hoping for at a Notre Dame perspective. This because Hartman is we could have got a lot of those games last year if he was there. So we're hoping with a stronger, more adept team with him that better results will happen. So, but until you actually play the games, you never know what happens. So, but that's what the hope is in South Bend.
No, I'll definitely say Caleb Williams we don't hate as much as that
as Laken Riley.
As Laken Riley. Obviously it still stings. It's funny though how there was a few Sooner fans, there wasn't many, that still thought that we should claim that Heisman Trophy that Caleb Williams won last year, but I say pass that on and move on, guys. Let's pass on, move on. We will claim to anything, I guess, at this point. Navy Notre Dame, real quick, as we keep on keep on the topic of Notre Dame. Previewing this weekend's game against Navy. I know Navy in the past has always been a team that could upset, or at least stay in contact here and there with a few teams. Of course, a lot of new looks since. Any chance of an upset, or is Notre Dame going to take care of business on Saturday?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's chance for upset. It's going to be an interesting game to watch, though, as Navy has, for his first time since 2007, has a new head coach, Brian Newberry. He was a defensive coordinator last year, and they were actually one of the better defensive units in the country for Navy, and which is obviously a hard place to get players and bring and develop them, but he did a really good job with that team. So I'm interested to see what kind of wrinkles they put in. Listening, to practice reports, the things in the offseason, they're adding some passing elements into their game. So like I'm looking at screen passes. Who knows what that's going to look like? Because Navy just doesn't pass, right?
No, they don't. No.
So what does that look like? Do they have the quarterbacks that can make the pass? I have no idea. So that's going to be an interesting wrinkle. But coming back to last year, last year Notre Dame was up 35-10 against Navy. They ended up winning 35-32. And the reason for it is Navy went to a zero blitz formation on defense, and poor Drew Pine just lost his soul and couldn't do anything with the football. Couldn't pass. We couldn't run anymore. He just couldn't manage the offense, which is why I think we decided after that game, we're definitely going out to get a transfer quarterback because we can't go for this again. But I think with Sam Hartman, those types of situations won't happen. There may be some, as everybody goes through in the first game, you always have those weird results in that first game. Absolutely. This one's in Dublin, Ireland. Sam Hartman's first start with this offense. How are they going to gel? This is Navy's first start with this new head coach, with this new offense. How are they going to gel? It might be a weird, ugly game at times, but I think Notre Dame should pull away and get an easy one here.
No, yeah, definitely. I think Notre Dame's got this game, but it's Navy. If you go through and just look at their games every year, it's Notre Dame can win by 50, or Notre Dame can win by 2, and you never know which game you're going to get, and that's what makes the Naval Academy, the military academy schools so great to watch against a big school, because you don't know what you're going to get. You might get the best military academy game ever. You never know what you're going to get. And that's what makes it special. And I think that's what makes this, Notre Dame Navy game in Dublin so special, is that it might be the best game of the year, but it also could be Notre Dame winning by 40 points.
Yep. No, and that's a great point, Jordan, because, a few years back, Army should have won down here in Norman and went to overtime, double overtime, and we finally took care of the win. But no, that's a great point. I mean, Air Force, Army, and the Navy, any given Saturday, they always have that one game that not supposed to win, and they do win, or they
just never stop.
No, they don't. No,
keep coming, man. And if you left your foot off the gas, they're going to get back in the game. So definitely a good learning experience for a team for sure.
Kind of felt bad for them. It's like poor Army. These guys out here, nobody really gave them a chance, and they actually should have. should have upset it, but
I noticed that was a springboard game for her, wasn't it? Because they kind of went on a run the
Mhm.
last couple years after that, like this really playing really good football. So yeah, definitely a good program build. Lost even in the loss there, they built the program up for that. So
coaches on the hot seat. Of course, I can name a few here in the Big 12 and throughout the country, but are there any coaches in your guys's? Tony, we'll start with you first. Coaches on the hot seat. My list is definitely Steve Sarkisian down in Texas. I think this is make or break for him. Brent Venables. I know we off air we talked about Oklahoma. I think even though this is his second year, a lot of pressure. Headed into the SEC, but Jim Harbaugh's name's mentioned. I know last night's podcast on Herman Rodge, Mr. U. Shout out to him. He mentioned about Jim Harbaugh, being potentially on the hot seat. Jimbo, I think, in the SEC definitely be probably the biggest, in my opinion, the probably coach of the year that is definitely on the hot seat. Any coaches in your eyes, Tony, that you think is on the hot seat or could be at the end of the season?
yeah, from the Big 12 perspective, Neil Brown, West Virginia, that has been, he said it himself at the preseason. He knows his job's on the line this year. He's going to coach like it. So I'm interested to see. I mean, he did so well at Troy, and it just hasn't happened in 4 years at West Virginia. So I'm thinking he's gone. But I'm hoping he's able to turn that around a little bit there. Tony Elliott, I just feel like this Clemson. That Clemson tree from Dabo is just not looking good. But Tony Elliott had a really terrible first year, but they also had a lot of stuff they dealt with. I know they had the school shooting and things like that. So I'm thinking they're going to give him a little more time. But if he has another terrible season like last year, they may pull the plug early. You're right on with Jimbo. We talk about him quite a bit in our podcast about somebody has as much talent as he has, and he just messes it up every single year. I'm interested to see like how he does with play calling this year and what happens there, because I mean they lost a lot of players in transfer portal as well. What is that going to look like? Are they going to change the culture? Maybe because they lost the right people. I don't know. For his sake, I hope that's the case. Up here near Big Ten country, Mel Tucker in Michigan State, they had that one really good season in 2021, 11-2. They got a really good transfers in that year, and then the every 3 years it's been terrible. So and he has that long contract extension they gave him, so I don't think he can afford to fire him, but he would be on my list if he continues to have this. He's recruiting terribly, he's coaching terribly. I just don't see how he can last much longer. And I had Brett Venables as well, just because I don't think it would happen, but I think he brought in the right transfer people on defense. I like a lot of the transfers they brought on defense and offense. So I think they'll change things around. They won't have that bad of a season. But I know you guys will probably get angry down there sooner or later if they have another 6-7 type season. So if he has that, then he might be in trouble. So I don't know, Jordan, if you had anybody you wanted to add to that list.
Tom Allen, Indiana.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yep.
Big Ten country, he's 30 for 40 since starting. He started off pretty hot, pretty good. Tony's really high on Indiana.
That 1 year it was, then Michael Penix got hurt, man. That's all it took.
So I think he's on the hot seat. I don't think probably not like super hot during the season, but if he doesn't get better and have a better season this year, and if they're on the bottom half of the Big Ten, I can see him getting fired at the end of the year. There's only a couple coaches I can see getting fired through the season, and Neil Brown is probably the biggest. If he doesn't start decent enough, over 500 in the first 5 games, I can see him getting canned early. But other than that, I mean, I don't think Jimbo's going to be gone. There's too much money in that.
Yeah, I think Jim Harbaugh will be safe as well, just because I feel like their schedule is so easy. There's no way they're going to lose any games before Penn State, Ohio State, and I think they have a really loaded team too. So we'll see.
What Penn State's head coach? Maybe.
Oh, James Franklin.
He's Franklin,
king of 10-2, 9-3. I don't know. I don't know, man.
Yeah, the 2 losses always the same.
Ohio State, Michigan every year. They lose those, but they win the rest. So is it a successful season or no? I don't know.
Yeah, but those are the couple that what Tony said. Those are the big names that probably are on the hot seat or getting warm enough that if they don't have a good season, their seats gets on fire.
I'll shoot one that kind of came to mind just because he's been here for so long. And, if you look over time, he only really had one really, really great year, and that was back in 2011. What's your guys' thoughts? Can Mike Gundy be potentially out at Oklahoma State?
That's a good one. I think he'll have a bounce back season, but if he doesn't, that's going to make things interesting because he has been there a while, and there's been a lot of things that has popped up that players are getting mad at him. A lot of players transferred last year. I'm just interested in what the culture is like down there. What's the vibe for the players and the administration? Because I could see it happening, but he's been there so long. He's like an institution there. It's like firing like a Bobby Bowden type or something like that. That's been at a school so long, but it would have surprised me. I mean, because I'm sure they don't want to go for another losing season, but he somehow finds these crazy coaches, these crazy transfers that turn things around. I don't know. What's the Oklahoma thought on Oklahoma State? Like, is there expected to be a bounce back this year?
Well, from the Oklahoma standpoint, a lot of people really are high on us, and rightfully so. I think. Again, Oklahoma 10-2, 11-1. I think is really the ceiling. Nobody's talking about national championships here. Probably for the first time since, for the exception of last year, probably for the first time since 99. I would say probably was the last time that we legitimately just aren't even talking. Well, this is a national championship season, so we got that at least off our plate for once. But going back to Oklahoma State, I think really the biggest key is. Now, of course, Oklahoma State, final year of Bedlam, even though it's not a rivalry when you're 92-19 against the other team. But, no shots to OSU, but that's the truth. But, for Oklahoma State, it's really been, can Oklahoma State finish out beating Oklahoma, something that Mike Gundy never did as a player, and he's only done it, 3 times as a head coach, and one of them legitimately won. The other 2, if Bob Stoops had not punted the ball back to Tyreek Hill, and then Lincoln Riley didn't have to give up just because he was leaving, and that was perfectly fine. But that's a conspiracy theories around here. Is that
I felt like he did, though.
Yeah. But anyway, Lincoln. No, I think Oklahoma State. I think really a lot more pressure this year is besides Brent is really Mike. I think it's can he finish out beating the Texas and the Oklahoma and maybe try to get that Big 12 championship, but. Again, of course, they could flat out dominate the new Big 12 because, there's not really a team once you eliminate Oklahoma and Texas. Not that we haven't been that dominant in the last few years, but, maybe he does make that run and stick around. But Oklahoma State is really interesting. They can recruit. They've been having a hard time recruiting this year, but one thing I'll give Mike Gundy's credit is he can bring in the coaches and they move on to become really good coaches and head coaches for a few, but it's interesting. I think OSU is really the team to watch, except for, from a Big 12 standpoint. Can OU bounce back? That's the biggest question. I think that's the pressure that everybody's really, really asking right now.
I definitely think can their defense bounce back? That's the biggest.
Defense was atrocious.
That defense was so good the last, 2 years, and then last year they just fell apart.
I feel bad for Brent because, he lost 30% to either transfer or graduation, but and I get everybody went out to LA. I get that. That's not, I would live in LA too if I could compared to Norman. But I get that. But when you're ranked 123 out of 32 teams now, something like that.
Yeah,
that was bad. So definitely, he's getting the players in. So. The culture's changing, so I really believe this year's a bounce back year. If not, I got some concerns.
Yeah, I think that's the point. He just got to get the right players in there because I think you saw what he could do with the right players, and the recruiting has been top notch. The last couple of years with him there, so I think they'll get the player. I like Peyton Bowen, the safety coming in.
Oh yes,
as a Notre Dame fan, he ripped our heart out at the last minute a couple times there. So we have some feelings about him, but I think he'll be one of the top safeties in the country very soon. And I think we talked a little bit also about the offensive Jackson Arnold. I think quarterback wise, you guys are set for the future. And I think you're getting the right receivers in, good running backs in. So I think in due time, Oklahoma will be back. But then you go to SEC. What's that going to look like? What's that schedule dynamics going to be? How will that change things? I'm always interested in that. We talk a little bit more about realignment. Is a lot of these teams have transferred to different conferences, say like a Nebraska, a Miami, teams like that have not had success in their new conference. And so I am worried about that because you're playing a different team that is not, it's just different. And I hope that doesn't impact teams in a negative way, you know?
No, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, Oklahoma's schedule was one of probably the toughest, I'm sure, next year. And that's fine. I mean, the SEC, besides for the exception of Vanderbilt, you got a tough team week in and week out, and Vandy's a nice weekend getaway to Nashville and have some fun and enjoy your team win and get out, go back home. So
unless Florida,
they're gonna.
Yeah, unless you're Florida,
and that's another one. Is Billy Napier? Is he on the hot seat? He's got
to be if they have another losing season. His recruiting, I mean, obviously their NIL is probably helping with that. Top 5 recruiting class right now and getting a bunch of 4- and 5-star players. But if they have a never losing season, if I'm a player, why would I want to go there after multiple losing seasons? He just does not seem to get a hold on this. Graham Mertz, we talked about this on podcast. I feel will be the worst. And maybe I'm wrong on Graham Mertz, but he just feels like the worst college football quarterback right now. At Wisconsin, I just remember watching as a Notre Dame fan. We just threw back to back to back to back interceptions, and he just always seemed to be inconsistent, can never do things. Outside the first game he played, he just never got it together. And I just can't believe he's the quarterback they found to put in place. But he's a quarterback whisperer, so maybe he can fix him. I don't know.
But they didn't have a quarterback in place even last year.
No.
I mean, Anthony Richardson was not what people thought he was.
He was hurt a lot of the year too, I think, right? So,
yeah, and even the backups weren't that great. So, I mean, they didn't have anyone. So maybe Graham Mertz is
They should have got the Texas backup. What's his name?
Malik Hudson Card.
No,
the other
one
guy
who did a transfer.
Oh,
I forgot his name.
I can see his face.
Yeah, him. But he's like, I think he's a really good quarterback. If they should have put feelers out for NIL for him, if they have NIL to pass around, because there's just a lot of players out there they could have got that had more skill than Graham Mertz. I'm just surprised they settled on him.
Let's see. I can see his face. It's not Malik Murphy.
It is, isn't it?
Is it?
It's Malik Murphy. And I just feel like what I saw from him last year was really good. I think like if a Manning wasn't behind Ewers, that he would be the future of this team. But that's why I'm surprised he didn't transfer and kind of see the writing on the wall. But I think that maybe he's thinking maybe if there's an injury this year, he can get some playing time. But I think he can potentially land with somebody next year and have some good impact.
Oh, I agree. I think I think it's another big time year for Florida and a lot of angles for their whole program just in general. And Billy Napier, and of course that leads to the of course the preseason top 25 came out a few weeks ago, I think last week or early this week, and overrated, underrated teams. Real quick, I'm going to breeze through the top 10. And we'll go from there. Georgia at number 1. No, who's surprised by that? Michigan, Ohio State, Florida, Alabama. Number 4, Alabama. 5, LSU. 6, USC. 7, Penn State. 8, Florida State. Clemson at 9. Washington at 10. And then 11 through 20, we got Texas, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Utah, Oregon, Kansas State, TCU, Oregon State, Wisconsin, Oklahoma. And then finish out the top 25, North Carolina, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Tulane, Iowa. Jordan, in that top 25 list, is there a team that you see as potentially overrated or rankings too high for them to start off the year? And if so, who is it? And vice versa to your underrated team. So if there's an underrated team, if there's somebody that's not in the top 25, definitely put them in there.
No, I definitely think, and I mean, I think me and Tony talked about this before. I may be wrong, but Washington. I think Washington's overhyped right now. I don't know why it is, but I just think I know why. I don't know. They didn't show much so much last year to make them seem like they're, people have them in their top 4 to end the season. I just don't know if Washington's that team this year. I think they're kind of like that, fourth team maybe, but their defense. I still have question marks on their defense, and I still have question marks on Michael Penix Jr. on if he can stay healthy, if he can be that guy. That's my overrated. My underrated is Notre Dame. No, I'm kidding. My underrated is probably Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's going to be a lot better than 19 this year. I think, with their new head coach, new system, new everything, I think they're going to have a lot better of a season than being 19th on this list. I could see them finishing in the top 10, maybe. I could see them somehow getting to the Big Ten championship game. Yep. And that's how high I'm on Wisconsin right now. I just think they're a little better than what people give credit to them for.
For me, overrated, I want to say Texas, just because I feel like every year it's the same story. Texas is back. Texas has all this talent. There's no way they're not going to be in it at the end, and then they get 8-4 season, and then it's it for Texas being back. They have all the pieces, right? They have Quinn Ewers. They have the wide receivers, some of the best wide receivers in the country. They have some good, talented young running backs. I just got to see them put it all together because they had a lot of these pieces last year, and they didn't do as well. I know Quinn Ewers had some injuries last year, but they had the same players last year, and they underperformed. Are they going to now suddenly take that step? I want to see it. So until I see it, I'm going to list them as overrated. Another one on overrated, just to call them out, is USC. I think and they'll have, but a lot of people are putting them in the playoff, and they don't have the depth yet on defense. They had an injury this week on their D line, who was a starter, so they're already starting to hit already on that depth pieces. Now Caleb Williams win them a bunch of games, but they're going to go in a crazy stretch where they have to play Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, Oregon, UCLA 5 of the last 6 weeks, and that's just a tough stretch. I don't see them going unscathed. They lost both times to Utah last year. I think they're going to lose to Notre Dame this year, potentially to Oregon. I know this team is going to be great offensively, but as you saw against the Tulane game, that defense, they didn't fire a defensive coordinator. They kept him. And no offense to the Oklahoma teams of the past, I feel like this is Lincoln Riley style. They play really high-level offense, but they don't do enough on defense to stop in the big games. And so I think that's going to come back and bite them there. As far as underrated, I have Duke underrated. I really love quarterback Riley Leonard. Last year, he had 33 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. They scored 32.8 points a game last year, which is only behind Clemson, North Carolina, and Wake Forest. Their defense was really good. Mike Elko, obviously former defensive coordinator at Notre Dame and Texas A&M, knows what he's doing on that side of the ball. And they held opponents 22.1 points a game last year. I like that they have a lot of those players back, and they're going to be a dangerous team. They have a tough schedule, so they may end up the same as they were last year, but I don't think it's going to be blowout fashion. I think any game they lose is going to be a close game, and I feel like they're going to be a tough out for anybody they play. So that would be my underrated team there.
Would it be wrong to say overrated? Michigan is overrated.
That's what I was about to say. Penn State as well.
Everybody loves those teams. I want to see Drew Aller actually do it at Penn State. Yep. They're already saying he's much better quarterback than they had in the past, but he hasn't played it down. And I want to see this guy actually go out there and start a whole game, play it, and 300-400 yards or whatever they think he's going to do. Now the running back tandem, they have a really good defense, but they just can't beat Ohio State and Michigan year after year. Last year they had a big lead against Ohio State. They lost it. They got blew out by Michigan. I got to see it. I just don't think James Franklin has it in him to beat those teams.
It's the Franklin curse.
It is, yeah.
But Michigan, man, I just don't know what to think of Michigan. They have all the pieces back. They hit the transfer portal really well. They have a really easy schedule. I would be not surprised at all if they go undefeated against that schedule. They really don't play anybody for the first 8 weeks. And it's just it's them and Georgia's schedule is just crazy to me looking at them, how terrible they are compared to these are teams that were in a playoff last year and they get to play this easy schedule. That's one thing I'm looking forward to a realignment, that there won't be schedules like this in SEC. That we look for a lot of the schedules in SEC when your SEC preview. Were so easy. They play 4 FCS teams, and it's just and they get away with it because it's such a strong conference because of the SEC, and I just think it's crazy to me, but that's my own personal opinion.
No, absolutely. I'm with you. And on my end, I know people are like, well, that's not a surprise. You're an OU fan. I would definitely say Texas because, I mean, again, we're going back to this, since 2010, they've had one 10-plus win season, and that was Tom Herman and what was back in 2018 when Sam Ehlinger had to be the guy on the mic saying that we're back, and the following years, that was obviously not the truth. So, you have one 10-win season since 2010, or at least at the beginning of the 2010 season. You've only had one 10-win season every year, as you mentioned, every year that constantly doing this. Texas is back garbage, and the real question is just like Oklahoma, but in different aspect. If not now, when? For Texas, when it comes to lining up, you got Quinn Ewers coming back, of course, Arch Manning, the so-called quarterback of the future. You bring in, you still got Xavier Worthy, one of the best receivers in the country. Sanders, one of the up-and-coming tight ends in the country, and then, of course, you got your whole offensive line coming back, and then, you look at defensively. Jalen Ford, one of the best in the Big 12 defensive players. So you look at it, of course, Sarkisian did wonderful in the transfer portal, bringing in, I believe, 2 defensive backs and a receiver. And that's good because, you got a running back core that's going to lose, obviously, Bijan Robinson that lost to the draft. And that's a big-time loss. But, again, it goes back to that is, schedule lines up perfect. Well, non-conference-wise, you got Alabama, which is going to be a tough one in Tuscaloosa. I don't see them winning that, but Alabama is having a quarterback issue that we really don't know what route they're going to go. And then underrated, I'm going to go out on the limb and keep it in Big 12 country, and I'm just going to go Kansas State. Chris, I always butcher his last name, Kleiman is a phenomenal coach, did well at obviously North Dakota State, won many national championships, and has done phenomenal at Kansas State. Oklahoma can't beat him. That's pretty impressive if you coming in, but obviously they got to replace Deuce Vaughn, and that's a big loss. But I like Will Howard, an up and coming Big 12 quarterback, and you got Cooper Beebe, I think it's how you say his name, B I guess, as the offense led by the offensive line as my chair goes back. But defensively, they got some places, but I wouldn't be surprised if they really make a run in the Big 12 and then kind of sneak into that mix towards the end. It depends on how the season plays out. So Texas definitely, Kansas State. USC, I think, is going to be a whole lot better. And I know, we always go where the OU route's going to go. But USC, regardless of what Lincoln Riley does and doesn't do, he can't outduel you because his defense, he'll win by points. But unless you're Utah, if Lincoln Riley can fix that defensive coordinator position with Alex Grinch and get somebody that can actually coach, he would be a heck of a head coach from all angles. Offensively, he's a genius. I got to give him props on that.
Yeah.
But that defense is just his biggest kryptonite.
And I wonder if it's because of the offense he plays. It's got to have something to do with it. But I was surprised he didn't fire Alex Grinch. I think maybe he thought maybe there'll be more improvement in year 2, and maybe there will be. Alex Grinch just hasn't been good for a while since Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
So, you got to think it's I hope he would make a change. There's a lot of good defensive coordinators out there. To your point, if he can fix that side of the ball and improve defensive recruiting, I think the biggest thing is offensive line and defensive line recruiting. They're still missing on those guys. They always will get the quarterback in USC. They're always going to get their wide receivers. They're always going to get the cornerbacks. But they haven't had the defensive offensive line in a while, and he needs to really focus on that. If he can focus on that, I mean, that's definitely a team that you don't want to be playing in the years to come for sure.
Tony, I'm surprised you didn't say Auburn. Underrated team, Auburn.
Freeze.
I do think they're like a kind of a dark horse candidate. I really like what he's doing as far as the transfer portal getting. I don't know about quarterback this year, Peyton Thorne, but I think he's definitely getting the right pieces on the recruiting side, the transfer side. I like the Ohio State transfer, Caleb Burton at wide receiver. I think he'll be able to do some things there. I think he was always able to win, always able to beat Alabama, so I think they're going to do some damage down the road. This year, they probably will surprise a couple of teams. May not be the best record-wise, maybe 8-4, 9-3 type of season, but that I think Auburn would take that after the last couple of years that they've had.
I want to ask you guys a real simple question. I want to do this for the honor of Herbert Raj, their podcast, Bama Fans for Life. But they've always talked about the quarterback not really controversy, but the quarterback battle that is happening in Tuscaloosa. And I went out and said Ty Simpson. Probably, in my opinion, I like his speed. I think that kind of helps what they can bring to the table with Simpson. But who do you guys have? Can Tyler Buchner take over Jalen Milroe, or is it Simpson? Who do you guys have as Alabama's starting quarterback?
So yeah, but kind of monitoring that battle, and if you depending on who you read or who you got, everybody there's a different person that has won practice, whether it's Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson, or Tyler Buchner. Honestly, I think neither one of those three is going to get the job done from what I've seen. Tyler Buchner is just not consistent enough, and I don't think Nick Saban's going to like that. I think he's going to throw way too many picks. And his problem really is he needs a lot more. I just don't think Alabama's a fit. He needs a lot more playing time and more time to build that experience. His high school year was canceled during COVID, his senior year.
Right.
So he didn't play. He didn't play his freshman year. He backed up at Notre Dame, and then he got hurt last year. So he's played in a couple games in 3 years. He just needs consistency to go out there and get experience. I don't think he's going to get a chance to do that at Alabama. Jalen Milroe is a great runner. He's more like a Jalen Hurts type. But he just he's like he turns the ball over way too much. I think I read that 10% of the time he's out there it was a turnover, and that's like compared to like what 3% or something small number that Bryce Young had. So again, you compare that, it's gonna be tough. And I just don't feel like Ty Simpson is taking that job like I think a lot of people thought he would. I think they'll start with Jalen Milroe, but I think the person to watch throughout the season is Dylan Longare, or however you pronounce it. I think I have it right. It just seems from listening that he has been having the best performance, but he's just so young. He's a true freshman. And I know Nick Saban probably doesn't want to throw him out, but if you think back to like Tua, where he threw him out towards the end of the season, I think he's going to be saving him for a time where they're going to need to throw somebody in to get a spark. And if he gives him that spark, he's going to take that job and run with it. But that's my opinion there.
No, yeah, definitely. I think the three quarterback, battle. Tyler Buchner, watching him at Notre Dame. I mean, we went to the spring game and watched him at the spring game.
Oh man, he could have completed a pass in the spring game.
He looked so bad.
Man.
And like, I remember Milroe when he came in for Bryce Young that one time. Everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is amazing. He's so fast." And then, he started being
Texas A&M game. It was tough. Yeah,
being inconsistent passing, and I just think Ty Simpson just hasn't had experience.
Right.
He attempted 5 passes last season. He completed 4 of the 5 and had 35 yards. I think if he just doesn't have experience, I think that's the biggest thing Alabama doesn't have right now is the quarterback that's experienced. The most, you have Tyler Buchner who played 2 games last year, sat out, the year before. And then Milroe, he played 2 games last year, a game and a half.
Played off and on, yeah. I think
he
tries most. Yeah,
he was 31 for 53 with 297 yards, but had 5 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So, like you said, Tony, like in practice inconsistency, and I think Nick Saban it sucks that he doesn't have a backup from having. You're going from one of the best quarterbacks in college football to now going to probably a third to second, maybe probably third string quarterback to be your starter.
Absolutely.
And I think Nick Saban's not going to like that. And I think we're going to see early the young guy, then later.
Yeah, I just don't see. Like, I'm surprised they didn't get somebody else in transfer portal other than Tyler Buckner. But I know they tried Tyler Van Dyke from Miami and others. So I think they offered Sam Hartman a lot of money too, but he turned
Mhm.
them down. So I think if they had Sam Hartman on this team, that's national championship.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's their one weakness. Their defense is loaded. Their offensive line is loaded. Their running back room is loaded. The receiver, I'm a little worried about. They haven't really restocked that as well as they could have. So quarterback wide receiver combo is a little worrisome, and I'm thinking they may lose to Texas week 2.
Mhm.
That's a one game I'm watching. I'm
Yep.
wondering second half they're losing. That's where I'm wondering, does he throw in the young freshman to see what he's got if they're losing and they don't need a spark? Now, Jalen Monroe or Tyler Buckner, the one thing they can do is they can run when things break down. And so that's why I think they might one of those two start the season, because Ty Simpson doesn't have that in him. And he hasn't been consistent of passing. So if you're going to get inconsistent passing, at least put some athletes in there that can get you a first
Yep.
down. And I think they're probably just out talent a lot of teams this year, but I just don't know what to think of Alabama this year.
No, I think that's the biggest question is what there's no identity. We can't really grasp what kind of Alabama team that this is going to be from years past of Nick Saban. Of course, that leads to a simple question on this one as we wrap up, go down the home stretch in the next few minutes. Is the Alabama, what we always hear, Alabama dynasty? Is the dynasty in Alabama over, and is it now Georgia's? Is Georgia the next Alabama that we're seeing here as they are the reigning back-to-back national champions?
Yeah, definitely. Alabama's dynasty is slowly coming to
Yep.
an end. Probably not an end like everybody like, oh, it's just going to end.
Right.
I think they got like another couple years in them, but I think Georgia's taking over that dynasty
Yep.
and being that SEC powerhouse team that you're striving to beat, because now they're getting the recruits. Now they're developing these players. Half their defense is going to the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And so Georgia is becoming that Alabama. If Alabama doesn't win the national championship this year, I think it's Nick Saban's like first year since coaching at Alabama that he hasn't won
like 3
a
years.
national
3 years,
championship
yeah.
game in a 3-year span.
Yep.
Or 2 year, and yeah. So I think Alabama's dynasty's over unless they somehow, and it's Alabama and it's Nick Saban.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably going to happen, but somehow get a quarterback.
Well, here's the thing for Alabama. I think they'll be back next year. I think they're going to take a 1 year off, but that defense is loaded with young talent. Keon Keeley, a young defensive lineman, again stolen from Notre Dame, but got him and got Caleb Downs, the safety. Got a lot of young players back there that probably will get some learning pains this year, but they're going to be loaded next year. And then the wide receiver, the quarterbacks they have coming in the next couple of years are going to be elite. And I think Dylan Longren is going to be a really good quarterback for him as well. And so I think, it might be 1 year off here. And then they come back with a title, 1 or 2 titles in the next 5 years before Nick Saban retires. And then I think by that point it's Georgia's, and hopefully somebody will step up and challenge him, because I think it's kind of a boring sport if there's this one team that. What I don't enjoy now about is like all recruits go to 1 or 2 places,
Exactly.
and
Yep.
all the other teams really have no shot, and so I hate that. I wish there was a little more parity, so I'm hoping that eventually comes.
Especially because you got the 1 or 2 teams that get them,
Mm-hmm.
and then all these other schools are waiting until the year after where they're going to transfer, and now it's like it's just weird. We're in that weird time in college football where it's like it's more transfers nowadays than recruiting.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I missed the old transfer rules where you transfer, you got to sit out the year, but different times, and I get it's all about the money, and I totally get it. So, Final question as we are wrapping up playoff predictions. We can't talk college football without the final year of not just the Final Four, but the before the expansion, but Final Four predictions on my end. I got Georgia, USC, Michigan, and Texas. As much as I hate saying that.
Okay, I have Georgia. I have LSU. I feel like SEC will get 2 teams in. I just think a lot of different conferences will kind of beat each other up. I have Michigan, and it's not a homer pick, but I got Notre Dame in the Final Four.
I can see that.
because I do think Sam Hartman will make a difference there. I do have Georgia winning third year in a
Yes.
row.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a surprise there.
So for me, I have Georgia, Michigan. I'm with Tony on Notre Dame. I think if they could get through those 3 games, it's going to be the biggest thing. But I'm a toss up because I'm a huge Florida State Jordan Travis guy. I think he's going to have a great season. But also LSU is just LSU right now. I'm going with Florida State. I'm changing it up.
I'm
going with Florida State. I think Jordan Travis is going to have a better season. And really, though, the LSU Florida State, it's going to come down to this week 1 matchup against LSU Florida State. Whoever wins that game, I think is going to go in. It is going to be in the college football playoff. But it's a toss up. LSU or Florida State. I can't choose. It's so hard.
So what Jordan is saying is whoever wins that game is going to be his final.
That's right.
4th team.
Yep.
It's going to be a play-in for Jordan's final pick there. So
yeah, before I bet on it, I gotta have this play-in game first. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the air raid. Tony and Jordan, thank you so much for coming on, talking some college football, and it was a fun show.
Yeah,
yes, sir. Thank you for having us. Follow along with us, guys, in the Flat Pod, and this one was a fun. We will definitely follow on the rest of the season too, Mike. So appreciate it.
Hey, absolutely. You've been listening to the Air Raid Attack podcast. Listen to us on all major podcast platforms. We'll be back same time, same place next week. You all have a wonderful week and take care.